Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Hilaal TV. It's live from The Hague, where we heard the ICJ ruling early on. The International Court of Justice has delivered its ruling on the emergency measures requested by South Africa in its genocide case against Israel over the war on the Gaza Strip. We're going to open up the WhatsApp lines very soon where you can be part of the show. My name is Lukman Shadrach from the Cape Town studios, giving you a post-analysis on the ICJ ruling as well. And one of the things the court said, among others, that Israel must take steps to prevent acts of genocide in Gaza. But they stopped short of ordering a ceasefire, and I think we were all anticipating that would be the culmination of our case at the ICJ as well. The judges have not ruled on the merits of the genocide allegations, which may take years to decide. Best to get our legal minds into this conversation and find out about the ICJ ruling. And on the line, we'd like to welcome lawyer Rehana Khan Parker. Assalamu alaikum, Rehana.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me back, Hilaal TV, and good afternoon to everyone viewing the post-case analysis.
I tell you, it's been what an amazing day. If Friday, generally Friday is a short day for everyone and we've got so many things to do, it made it even shorter because there was so much to consider. But how proud are we to be South African right now?
Very, very proud. I think I speak for many South Africans and people around the globe who have been watching this case with great admiration. Firstly, we have to commend South Africa for taking this case to the ICJ amidst a big backlash by several Western countries. So I think for that, well done to our legal team. Certainly well done to our Minister of Justice, Mr. Ramola, as well as we must not forget, a woman who has been fighting this cause for a very long time, Minister Pandor. Naledi Pandor, Minister, without you, I don't think we would have got so far as we had in this case. So today, as I was when the case was launched, very proud of South Africa. 100%. And if you remember and reflect on my interview, I stated that prima facie, we have met the jurisdictional issue and that we have standing. So I felt particularly happy when I heard Judge O'Donoghue echoing what my forecast was.
100%.
So very, very proud, very, very proud, certainly for many reasons, and I'm sure we're going to get into it shortly, and
Absolutely.
I will certainly address the issue with regard to ceasefire and how I actually view the court's ruling, which I've just printed out, something like 26 pages of it. And I went straight to the measures that were the interim relief or the provisional measures. As I stated, that's the word that they use in the International Court of Justice. And why I seem to think that ceasefire is written in there.
It's we're going to open up the WhatsApp line to our audience, our viewers as well. You're welcome to correspond with us and let us know your thoughts. 079 085 2511. Only WhatsApps, no telephone calls, unfortunately. Let us know your thoughts about the ICJ ruling. We waited approximately 2 weeks for this to happen. Proud to be South African right now. This little country at the tip of Africa, taking on the proverbial Goliath and putting our best foot forward. Our legal team put their amazing case forward as well. And Rehana, one of the things, the court ordered Israel to actually take measures to prevent and punish direct incitement of genocide in its war in Gaza. Now, we all know that so many people have been killed. We're looking at numbers in terms of 26,083 people that have been killed in this war, wounded about 64,487, and also so many people still buried under the rubble, presumed to be dead in this process. Now, we all know this as, we call it genocide. We see it for what it is. We've taken it to the ICJ. Some parts of the world are slow to react to what's going on right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, well, I think it's just easy for South Africa, as I've said before, given our history.
Mhm.
So it's easy for us to understand the clause of apartheid. We easily identify with genocidal acts, incitement. Torture, detentions without trial, displacement and dispossession of land.
Absolutely.
So I think for us it's easy, but for certain countries who's never been exposed to it, yes, it does take a bit of time, but that's no excuse because we
Absolutely.
are dealing with human rights issues. You specifically mentioned the issue with regard to Provisional Measure 3, which was granted by the ICJ this afternoon, and it said the state of Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement. You use the words incitement to commit genocide
Yeah.
in relation to the members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. What is very important here, because I watched the voting, because, for us, it's always important to know what went on in the judges' minds
Correct.
and what swayed them and how they were thinking. So just to put this into perspective, this court consisted of 17 judges, of which 15 are sitting permanent judges of the ICJ, and each member state to this dispute, being South Africa, appointed its ad hoc judge, which of course was Judge Dikang Moseneke, and of course Israel appointed Judge Barak. So what is very interesting with regard to this particular measure which was granted was that the voting was in fact 16-1.
Correct.
16 in favor, 1 against. And I would have expected that Judge Barak would have joined the opposition, but strangely, for some reason, the Ugandan judge, Judge Julia Sepudinde, who's been on that bench since 2012, voted against.
Wow.
And for me, as a woman, that was so alarming. And it was even more alarming because the very next measure, which says, and that is measure 4, which says, State of Israel shall take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse condition of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And guess what? There too, it was only Judge Sepudinde from Uganda who voted against. So there were two votes here, which was clearly shocking for me, because I'm a woman and I'm expecting a woman to be more compassionate to the needs of especially the humanitarian disaster that is occurring in Gaza, especially with regard to pregnant women and babies and not being able to have deliveries and hysterectomies and the whole host of range of examples that were given by our legal team. So those two votes were shocking. However, what was for me, I think, gave me a sense of pride in international law and in human rights law was the overwhelming majority. I'm not talking just a 50%. We are talking about 15 judges to 17 in all the rest of the measures. Now that speaks volumes. It tells me that these judges applied the law. And when we heard the judgment and Judge Donahue giving the examples as to what persuaded them or swayed them to vote in a particular way, she gave examples of, they took judicial notice of the media. And I think that was important, that she gave examples of the media, and she gave examples of utterances by Israel Katz and Minister Gallant. So it tells me that they were finally in tune with what was really happening on the ground. And for me, that is very positive.
I think 15-2, overwhelming. We anticipated maybe a bigger split, knowing that the political climate does often impact various decisions as well. 15-2, overwhelming result for South Africa. Also, it shows the merit of our case that we put forward, and that this wasn't just a fly-by-night wanting to take the world stage. This was definitely a humanitarian cause and plea to the world to stop what is happening right now in Gaza?
Absolutely, absolutely. And turning to the question, and I think I've seen the posts going around. No ceasefire has been ordered specifically, and I think that what happened to these judges, that they actually crafted in their drafting of the reasons a very carefully worded interim relief. And if I look at the very first interim relief, and that will take me to why I am saying that ceasefire is inherently written into it,
Yes.
without using the word ceasefire, skirting it and using some other jargon or lexicon to be able to still achieve the same result. And that was by 15-2. Of course, we do know who were the opposition. It was Judge Seferinde and Judge Barak. The State of Israel shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in relation to the Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2. We know we've all learned a lot about Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. And then it says in particular, and Judge Donoghue read out the categories, that there were 4 of them. A, killing members of the group. 2, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within this group. Now, for me, that says a lot.
Yeah.
It says, and if you read that in relation to measure 2, which says, again on 16 votes to 1, also 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel, and here is the importance and the point that I'm trying to drive home. The State of Israel shall ensure with immediate effect that its military does not commit any acts described in those 4 features which I had mentioned about. So I think that is where it is written in.
Yeah.
So what the court has done, it's carefully crafted an interim measure saying we have not found, we haven't heard enough evidence, and we know that this was just an interim relief. We have not heard the merits of the matter. We've not heard South Africa fully as to why it says there is genocide committed by the Zionist army and the Zionists. And we've not heard the Israeli argument, but there are plausible reasons. And as I said, the threshold was very low to prove that we've got a prima facie case. And that is where I believe our ceasefire is in fact written in. Yeah. Because now they've got to come back to court. Remember, there is another report that Israel had to comply with. Correct. So Israel will have to comply with this preliminary order, this interim relief, the provisional measures, and provide a report to the ICJ as to what it has done to prevent this. Yeah. Now, this is important and this is crucial because the next month is going to be the testing ground.
Absolutely.
The next ground is when South Africa is now going to gather and watch, and all of us are going to be doing it, I believe. We're all going to be watching what is Israel doing, and each time it is acting contrary to these 4 measures set out in measure 1, the provisional measure, it will be documented.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interject, Rehana. We're opening up the WhatsApp line to our audience, 079-085-2511. Please correspond with us on the WhatsApp line, WhatsApps only, around your feeling about the ICJ case, the ruling today. The decisions that were made were passed down by the ICJ, 15-2 split on one of the merits, and I think it was 16-1 on the other as well. Convincingly, South Africa put a very strong case forward as well. Rehana, one of my questions I want to ask you is that now that this, as you rightfully said, now we're going to watch this over the next month. We're going to find out how this is all going to unfold. Do you feel that other countries are going to maybe put a case forward, maybe ally with South Africa, now that this ruling has been passed down?
I think so. I think the world has now become alive, especially those parts of the world who were dead to human rights, and those who have not supported South Africa. There are a vast majority of countries, largely in the Middle East and so forth, that has supported. Brazil is one of it, Venezuela, and so forth. However, I think in terms of diplomacy, yes, it's certainly going to play a great role. But what is important to me is that each and every country who's a signatory to this genocide convention now has an obligation.
Absolutely.
So it's not just South Africa. South Africa can now call on all those other countries who are signatories to the very same genocide convention and saying, what are you doing to prevent or combat it? Because there's an obligation, as it was on South Africa, being a signatory to the convention, to take steps to pursue the protection of the Palestinian people. It now falls flatly on all those other member states who are signatories. So I do think from a political view, and certainly from a diplomacy view, we're going to see a shift in the world order. I believe we've already seen it, and I do believe that is going to gain momentum. The test is now going to be for those signatories to the Genocide Convention who were not a party, who didn't support South Africa.
Yeah. Another question I want to pose to you. Now that the ICJ has passed down their official findings, their ruling, if you may call it, how does this how do we react to this in South Africa? Because, as you know, we have a lot of opposition to those of us that are pro-Palestine. What happens to us closer at home? Will this affect how people maybe look at genocide and support some of Israel's acts?
Yeah, people who are blind will remain blind. I mean, I've seen people, leave my Facebook group because of my post about being pro-Palestinian and pro-South Africa, standing up with our legal team. And you know what? I'm not the worst off.
Yeah.
I just don't know who's who in the zoo.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it's going to be. But I think one has seen, I mean, there are many South Africans who have not been fully au fait with the Palestinian plight, who have said, you know what, it was this case, and hearing this case on the 11th and 12th, that opened my eyes and started shifting my thinking. So yes, but those who are brainwashed and are totally blind will remain blind.
Yeah. I saw a very interesting interview with Dr. Francois. I'm sure you must have seen that on socials as well. Interviewed by one of the international TV stations, and she was in studio, and very strong advocate for the brothers and sisters in Palestine, where she said, how dare we talk about economic strife? How dare we talk about Amazon parcels that are delayed when there are children, there are mothers that are dying every single day in Palestine? And I think that hit home quite a bit as well. And I think the world, as you rightfully say, the narrative is changing. I think the ICJ has, our case at the ICJ has started that. But I think more and more people are seeing exactly what is happening and are being vocal about it as well.
Oh yes, I won't be surprised to see our law faculties next year inundated with applications for people wanting to study law, because suddenly now international law and human rights law and constitutional law has become even more popular than before. So yes, it's an interesting space to watch, and I think what we need to do is just continue what we are doing, continue to talk about the Palestinian people, continue talking about the voiceless, continue raising social awareness of the atrocities meted out. I haven't followed the news as to what has happened in the area post the outcome of the ruling, but I suspect that Israel will just continue what it's doing.
Yep. Let's look at some of the other merits that were put forward by South Africa and that the ICJ ruled on today and made mention. What are some of the other interesting facts that caught your attention?
Look, I think what definitely caught my attention was, as I said, was definitely the voting.
Mhm.
And what caught my attention was that the court is acutely aware of what it needs to find when it's going to hear the merits case, because all the examples that was given by Judge Donoghue actually spoke to genocidal events.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, every aspect of it that she raised, and that was, and I must say, again, I must commend our legal team for the comprehensive papers that they filed in its application, because they gave all those examples, and the court actually echoed it in its in its interim ruling today. So the court is heading in a particular way. It's found that South Africa has met the low threshold, and it is plausible, and therefore interim measures are necessary. But I'm beginning to think that it's there, but they still have to hear the evidence on the merits. And I'm hoping that, given the examples that was given by Judge Donoghue with regard to the amount and the extent of the infrastructure and humanitarian crisis, that when it comes to hearing the actual case on merits, that we're not going to wait years. So I'm hoping that the same urgency it applied for the interim measures would apply for the actual trial when that will take place. So it's interesting. It was a very interesting. I have not had a chance to look at the preamble. Judge Donoghue mentioned that she's not going to go through it, but she gave a good overview, and the overview spoke to each and every element that she raised.
Like that.
An example that she raised spoke to genocide.
I like that, yeah. One of the, the rulings that Judge Donoghue actually mentioned was that Israel claims its war has been downgraded. The court finds this is insufficient to ensure Palestinian rights. Now, often enough, we hear these reports coming out every couple of days that the war's been downgraded, that they're targeting Hamas, that they are very structured in their approach to the war in the Gaza Strip as well. And yet, every other couple of days, we hear the alternative where hundreds have been killed. So if this is downgraded, I shudder to think what their true might of the Israel army is like.
Yes, I must say that was one aspect that didn't come out quite, and I would have thought a much sterner message would have come through the provisional measures, that was the provisional ruling. And I say so because when Israel presented its case, it gave this beautiful picture that it was easing up and opening up the humanitarian pathways. That one was led to believe that was true. Yet, on the converse, that is not true. So far as I'm concerned, Israel lied when it gave its argument on that score, because given what is happening on the ground post the 12th of January, when it raised that in its argument to make the world, believe that, oh no, we're not that bad. We have sort of eased up. We have downgraded the war, but it hasn't. It clearly hasn't. So it lied. And I was really hoping that would have been addressed
more sternly
in measures, but it wasn't. So I think how perhaps the judges did take heed of it and couched it in terms of that interim measure where the military, I think it is interim measure 2, the state of Israel shall endure with immediate effect that his military does not commit any acts described above. I think it's kind of embroidered it and crafted it in that manner. It for some reason avoided the word ceasefire.
Right.
For whatever intents and purposes, I don't know. But I think it's as I said, I believe it's tucked away in Prayer 2, in provisional measure 2.
Yeah, I think one of the positive outcomes, and I think we're all happy about this, no matter whose side you're on, is that Judge Donoghue mentioned all parties in the conflict are bound by international humanitarian laws, calls for the release of all prisoners of war. And I think this is a
Yes.
huge sign and a good step in the right direction, primarily because there are more Palestinians that are that are captured right now and away from their families.
No, absolutely. And I think she mentioned, I must just go through a speech that I'm not saying things which she didn't say, that certainly self-defense was not plausible, in the circumstances. And she started off by saying, yes, there was this attacks by Hamas on the 7th of October.
Yeah.
But then there was this military bombardment post that. And I think those were her first two sentences, and that spoke volumes.
Yeah. Very interesting over the next month. We're going to open up the WhatsApp lines. 1 or 2 WhatsApps already coming in. Another one, the first one says, Assalamu alaikum. Israel must give Palestinians their land back. And I think that's what we're all hoping for. We do know how the vast land of Palestine has been diminished to a very small amount of land where Gazans especially have been pushed to one area of Palestine. We have opened up the WhatsApp line 079-085-2511. WhatsApps only. Kindly let us know your thoughts about the ICJ ruling that happened today at The Hague. We in conversation with Rehana Khan Parker, who's a lawyer based in the Western Cape area as well. Rehana, the next month is going to be very closely watched.
I just want to respond to that WhatsApp question.
Yes.
Unequal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Will not be free until Palestine is free and until the people get their land back,
100%.
unequivocally.
Yeah.
That's it, without question.
Now, many are hoping for a two-state government, a two-state where, Palestine has their own government to rule, make decisions, and abide by those, and obviously been released from what is regarded as the biggest open-air prison.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I do not support this two states sort of solution to this crisis. The land belongs to Palestine, and that's the full stop. And I think we need to push that. I know our government has a slightly nuanced view on that, but my view is no, that land belongs to the Palestinian people.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the devastation that has happened, not just the 7th of October for the last 50, 60 years, some of that land is going to take years, if not decades, to...
We've seen how long the disposition and reposition South Africa takes. So can you imagine how long? There was one other important point which Judge Donoghue sort of drilled home was with regard to the plight of the children and the youth that didn't have the loss of education and the trauma that they will sit with for generations.
Oh yes.
So I thought that was also good for her to mention that. Lukman, you were wanting to talk about the next month. What are we expecting in the next month?
Yeah, I think we're going to watch that very closely from South Africa.
We're all going to be journalists. I believe we're all going to be journalists. We're going to be collecting data. We're going to be collating it. We're going to be sharing it. And we're going to document each and every atrocity.
Yeah. And you raised a very interesting point where our South African team leading from the front has now set the bar so high that a lot of people may just want to join the law faculty, make inquiries, because we are so proud to be South African, so proud to be part of the legal fraternity. And I'm sure you must be beaming at this news as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the reason why I became a lawyer is because I was schooled under apartheid and Nelson Mandela was in prison and we all sang that freedom songs. And yes, law was what I was going to do. So I do believe that this now, there was a time, I would say in the last 10 years or 15 years, where the humanitarian or not human rights activists went on a bit of a lull. And I think this has now provided that activism and just renewed the energy around constitutional law and human rights law. Definitely renewed it. And for that, I'm very proud. And I do think there's going to be a whole range like it was in the 70s and the 60s, actually. The first woman lawyer was woman lawyer of color attorney was in 1963.
Right.
Of course, Sissy Gould was she was in 62.
And we just celebrated 100 years of women being in the women in the legal fraternity as well.
and it's culminating in a month's time. And that is why I was very disappointed with Judge Sebutinde. Definitely, that for those reasons alone, I'm disappointed with her ruling.
Yeah, we're going to take a very short ad break, Rehana, and we'll come back for a quick roundup with regards to today's ICJ ruling. Thanks for joining us on live from The Hague. As you know, we all were glued to our televisions, wanting to hear the best 15-2 split for one decision, 16-1 for the other. And we're chatting to lawyer Rehana Khan-Parker, unpacking the ICJ ruling and what this means not only for South Africa, but for the world at large with regards to the case of in contravention of the Genocide Convention. You are still watching live at The Hague. We'll be back shortly. Assalamu alaikum, and thanks for joining us on Channel 347 on Hilaal TV. It's the International Court of Justice. We're doing a post-analysis of the delivered ruling on the emergency measures requested by South Africa in its genocide case against Israel over its war on the Gaza Strip. As well, as we know, it was a unanimous decision in most of the rulings. And on the Zoom link up, we have lawyer Rehana Khan-Parker, who's gracefully lent us her time, because I would imagine that you've been inundated with calls, with WhatsApps, with emails, and we really appreciate your time, Rehana.
Only a pleasure. It's my pleasure to share my views on the ruling with viewers. It's my absolute pleasure, and it's something which I enjoy doing. I enjoy analysing. I enjoy reading. I'm going to be a lawyer if I cannot debate.
So true, so true. Class of 2024, take note. If you're thinking about studying law next year, this is the lady to set the benchmark. She set the benchmark, and for you to follow as well. Rehana, earlier I chatted to another lawyer, Iksan Higgins, who we've had, yes, and a good friend of the station and yours as well. He sent me a message and his comment with regards to the ruling. If I'd like to maybe read one or two passages, and maybe we could comment on that as well. Iksan says as follows: as per the judgment of the International Court of Justice, Israel is being indirectly apprised that it may continue its bombing activities without possessing the requisite intention to perpetrate acts of genocide. It is peculiar that Israel has not been pronounced guilty of the actual commission of genocide or the presence of genocidal intent. The actions involving the wrongful killing of children and individuals, the deliberate deprivation of basic necessities such as sustenance, water and electricity, the target elimination of journalists, the bombardment of ambulances, hospitals and educational institutions, and the deliberate destruction of infrastructure are not being denied as constituting genocide based on the reports produced by the ICJ. I think Iksan raised very valid points. I think he's been diplomatic to a large point. I think he held back about what he really wanted to say, because it's what we all feeling. We thought that the ruling would be a little more concise, but as you said, words such as ceasefire were hidden tactfully in the deliverance from the ICJ. What are your thoughts about Iksan's message?
Yes, you know, it's because we've been watching. Ihsan has also been involved with the Palestinian plight way before this court case. So all those activists and each and every person who was not an activist, who's now become an activist and alive to this human disaster and destruction of infrastructure, feels for the people of Palestine. Mm-hmm. But what is important is that this court has not decided on the merits of whether those acts are genocide.
Yeah.
Remember, this was only the provisional measures. Both sides will still be given an opportunity to put its evidence and to present its case with regard to why the one says this and that act meted out across so many years, from 1948, some say earlier, till today, are acts of genocide.
Of course.
And of course, Israel will then present its case. So the court has not made that finding. And the court cannot make that finding because the court says we are not here to decide on the merits. Now, I know for all of us, we would have hoped and wished that the court would make such a pronouncement. And that is why I said, if we had listened to Judge Donoghue and when she had articulated all the examples that they relied upon for the interim or the provisional measures, in fact, point to genocide.
Yeah.
But they couldn't make that finding.
Absolutely.
Not at this stage.
Absolutely.
Because that was not what was required of them to do at this stage.
Yeah.
So yes, and that is why I stand by telling the judges that I hope that they will accelerate the hearing to occur much quicker, as they had done from the 29th of December until the 11th of January. And there we are now on the 26th of January, and we have a provisional ruling. So although I agree and I sympathize and I empathize and I feel it for the people of Palestine, and I understand where Ihsan Higgins is coming on from. However, falling back on the legal requirements and how this court is procedurally established, that it did not hear the merits of genocide.
Yeah. He goes on to say, on a positive note, it is notable that the International Court of Justice has unequivocally rejected Israel's contentions pertaining to jurisdiction, has disregarded Israel's endeavors to obfuscate genocidal declarations, and has made no reference to Israel's assertion regarding self-defense, deeming it inconsequential. I think that's a very good point.
Oh, no, absolutely. On the jurisdictional point, because I remember raising that in my interview with you.
Yes.
And again, the court articulated it today. The court said that for the court to have jurisdiction, there must be a dispute declared between the two member states.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the court and of course, Israel's defense and their argument was that they received the note verbal from South Africa. They responded to it, but South Africa could not receive it because it was a public holiday. And by the time that they did deliver it, it was delivered. It was acknowledged by the legal team for South Africa in their papers. The papers had already been filed, and South Africa had found that there was very little value in meeting with Israel, because they were simply going to do what they were doing. So in terms of jurisdiction, Israel fervently thought that they had a good point on jurisdiction to get rid of the case at this provisional measures stage, and that no provisional measures would be granted. So in any court, in any matter that we have before court, the first issue is always whether the court has jurisdiction. And once you pass that mark, you then go to legal standing. And once you pass that mark, then you come into the dispute or the merits. So I think Israel was overconfident in thinking that they could really bash us down on jurisdiction.
Or complicit. Or complicit in their thinking. A little bit of arrogance to a point as well.
Oh, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. You could see it in their body language in court on the 12th.
Right.
And on the 11th. They thought that they had this, they had this case in their pocket.
Yeah.
And we as lawyers are taught, never be overconfident.
Absolutely. Wearing your lawyer hat, looking at the next month, looking at what the possibilities are of what Israel's going to do in their response to the ICJ. Do you want to maybe gauge or have a stab at what's possibly going to happen?
No changes. I don't see any changes. Sure. We've seen the arrogance of Netanyahu even before the provisional measures, saying that, we're going to ignore this ruling. So I'm very surprised if it's anything different, unless the USA and UK is going to come to this party, because, and this, I forgot to mention this. Yeah. When you had asked me how is this going to impact the world, I completely lost sight about the one point that I needed to make. Who is really being tested now is the US and the UK, because now they are going to have to think very carefully, because we know that this war on the Palestinians would not have got to where it was if it wasn't because of the unequivocal warfare support from the United States and, of course, support from the UK.
Yeah.
So the two of those countries being members and signatories to the Genocide Convention,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to how South Africa is going to position itself in relation to particularly those two countries.
You know what? You hit the nail on the head there. And I think the rest of the world is thinking the very same. Quite a few other countries have come out in support now. That's the ruling's been made, or even prior to that as well. So lovely to see our Minister, Naledi Pandor, going to The Hague in support of our legal team. Just a stalwart when it comes to the struggle of those oppressed. President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered his speech just after 5. He kept us waiting for a little while for the family meeting. He found his laptop, but eventually gave his speech. I didn't see the merits too much of his speech. I'm not sure if you managed to catch any of that.
Yeah, I caught the tail end. I think it was fading, the broadcast was fading. But he too commended and praised the South African legal team, the ministers responsible from DIRCO, as well as the Minister of Justice. And he said that, he is proud, of South Africa, and quite rightly so. Quite rightly so. And he hopes that this will pave the way for other countries to uphold justice. And I think that out of his speech was key. And also to pave the way to end this humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Of course, he talked about a two-state solution, which I do not favor, but that's fine. He has that nuanced view of it. But be that as it may, we have to congratulate our president for leading from the front in the world in this particular case.
The ruling at the ICJ, does this now set precedent to other countries that would also like to bring a case forward for whatever they're going through, maybe very similar situation, or atrocities that have happened over the last couple of years?
Yeah, very interestingly, Indonesia has launched a case in the very same court. But because Indonesia is not a signatory to this Genocide Convention, so hopefully now they will be a signatory. But they have launched a case of the illegal occupation of the Zionists in Palestine from 1948. So they've taken a very interesting point because, as I said, they're not a signatory to the Genocide Convention. So they've brought a case. And yes, so it's going to be interesting to see how that is going to unfold. Probably very similar arguments, although we don't talk about genocide, it's about occupation. But the examples I'm sure that they will be using would be similar. And I'm hoping that South Africa would also join hands with them in supporting their case. Yes, I think the Myanmar case, the Gambia versus Myanmar, was definitely an eye-opener for genocidal types of cases.
Okay.
Generally, the ICJ, it's been about maritime waters, about, islands in the middle of Madagascar fighting over territorial waters, and Pakistan fighting with India over which island forms part of its territory. So, so for genocide and gross human rights violations, we are seeing a new trend.
Yeah. The conversations amongst your WhatsApp group and I think your network, it's going to be very interesting. Have you had any discussions just after the ruling? What is the general consensus from our legal fraternity?
Yes, so I'm on a good couple of WhatsApp groups with Women Lawyers Group, at least 3 of them, and it was just pure elation. It was just the sisterhood coming out of there was just amazing, Of course, everyone wanted a bit more, but on the rethink, it was. Didn't think that we would get more than what we got. Some surprise. I must admit, although I was also of the view that prima facie we had a good case, I was very worried about the political persuasions of the judges. And And therefore, I think the Ugandan judge definitely went in a particular way because of its political ties with Israel. So it was a concern. So I think, I think in general, we are all very pleased.
Yeah. BRICS and its allies, hoping that a lot more would be done over the next couple of months. We know that we've already gone into certain agreements in with our BRICS counterparts, and I think we're going to have a lot more support, a lot more vocal support from our BRICS allies.
Oh, I think so. I think, as I said, I foresee a different world from here on. I think South Africa has always been a country that's been respected, given its history. And I think now this case has certainly cemented us firmly on the grounds of standing up for human rights violations. What is important, however, is that South Africa needs to ensure that it positions itself similarly in other matters throughout the world.
Rehana, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Just a very quick roundup with regards for our viewers on today's ICJ ruling. Just a 5-minute synopsis on how we can look at things layman's terms, because you guys are in the legal fraternity, know all the legal jargon, and also what this means for South Africa and the rest of the world now that we've heard this ruling.
It's been a big win for South Africa, and I'm very pleased to be a South African. I'm pleased that I am born in this country, that I am able to witness in my lifetime a country taking on the issue of genocide for the Palestinian people who have been in this plight for over 75 years. So from that point of view, the interim measures that was granted by the court today might not have been what each and every one of us who were fighting for the freedom of the Palestinian people would have wanted. We would have wanted to see a ceasefire. However, if one reads carefully the provisional measures that has been granted by the International Court of Justice, I believe that the ceasefire has been very carefully crafted and embroidered in the wording of Provisional Measure 1 and 2, specifically 2 being that the military will desist from meeting out or falling foul of the measures called upon in the very first measure. So I think that for me definitely stands out. So what I want to say to viewers listening in, do not be too hung up on the word ceasefire. I think it's been carefully crafted. The court might have skirted around it, but has found a way to deal with it. And we're going to look forward to South Africa and us, each and every one of us, monitoring the situation post the ruling today, and seeing the report which Israel has been ordered to comply with, and present to the court within the next month as to what measures has it taken to prevent the atrocities as set out in the provisional measures. So, yes, it's not words that we had wanted to know, but I do believe it's sitting there in the provisional orders. Having said that, I think that we've done phenomenally well as South Africa. As a lawyer, I'm immensely proud, and I cannot stop talking about the importance of this case, and then just re-imbibing or refreshing those human rights values that many of us were brought up under apartheid. Many of us then went through a lull in the last 20 years post-democracy. And now suddenly we have found something that we are passionate about, that we support, and that we put our 100% behind. So yes, do not despair. I do believe this is just but the beginning. Remember, we haven't even got to the International Criminal Court yet. And the International Criminal Court will deal with individuals. This court is only dealing with member states. And also remember that we still need to hear, the ICJ still needs to hear this case on the merits of genocide.
Absolutely. Rehana Parker, Jazakallah so much for affording us your time. I do know that you are very involved and keeping a very close eye on the rulings and the next month as well. We'd love to invite you back onto onto Hilaal TV and to give a follow-up with regards to how this is going to unfold over the next couple of weeks as well. All the very best to you and your amazing legal fraternity. Wishing you all well over the next couple of weeks, because it's going to be something for the record books.
Oh, definitely. It's groundbreaking, and I'm proud to be part of this history. Thank you very much, Hilaal TV and Luqman Shadrack, for having me once again.
My absolute pleasure. Have a great evening. Assalamu alaikum. That's our legal eagle, Rehana Khan Parker, always making herself available to give us her analysis on the ICJ ruling. I tell you what, I can't be prouder to be a South African right now. The International Court of Justice has delivered its ruling on the emergency measures requested by South Africa in its genocide case against Israel over its war in the Gaza Strip. We have the WhatsApp line open if you'd like to be part of the conversation, 07908525511. After the break, I will be joined by two other lawyers who will have a panel discussion around the post analysis of the ICJ ruling. For Hilaal TV, this is live from The Hague.